Hello, welcome to this video. I hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about a really good book that I just finished called There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. So last year I read my first Elif Shafak book. I read 10 minutes and 38 seconds in the Strange World, which I really enjoyed. It was one of my favourite books that I read last year. And so this year I wanted to try another Elif Shafak book. And this book is her most recent release. This book was published in 2024 and it's really good. And this book could be described in quite a simple way, and it also could be described in quite a complex way, because there is a lot going on within the story. The simple way would be to say this is the story of a raindrop, but the more complex way would be, it would take longer. So I'm going to try and do somewhere in the middle. So yes, this story is about a raindrop, but it also follows three main protagonists. So we have Arthur, and he was born in Victorian London, and we follow his life from birth up until... And he is really interested in words and history, and he becomes really fascinated by the ancient city of Nineveh and also the epic poem of Gilgamesh, which is one of the oldest texts, if not the oldest texts, of literature ever written. Then we also have Narin. Narin is a young girl, I think she's 9 years old, and she lives by the river Tigris in 2014, and her plotline is about her and her grandmother travelling to a place in Iraq because she wants to be baptised. Then the third protagonist we have is Zalika. Zalika is living in 2018 London by the River Thames, and she is a hydrologist, so she is interested in the science of water, and she lives on a houseboat on the River Thames, which is pretty cool. And her plotline is about her coming to find herself again. She's just ended a marriage with her husband, and she's feeling a large sense of melancholy, so she's on this houseboat kind of trying to figure out her life. So in describing those three characters, you may think that there's not a lot connecting them all, which is what I thought when I initially started the book. I was like, wow, these are so different. How are they gonna come together? And Elif Shafak does such a good job of connecting them through theme and through plot loosely, and then as the novel progresses, they become kind of closer and closer together. So the end of this book really has a great crescendo. It really felt like the novel was building and building to the end, and it was so satisfying. And I suppose what I might say the plot of this is similar to, which is maybe a bit of a leap, is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So in Way of Kings, you have three main protagonists, and they aren't really connected. They all have their individual stories, but as the story goes on, as you come to understand the world more, you see how the characters are connected, and by the end, they are more connected than they were at the beginning. And this story is kind of like that. And also there's this wonderful recurring motif throughout the story of this raindrop. So we first meet this raindrop in the prologue, where we meet a character called King Ashurbanipal. I hope that's how you say it. And he is alive in 630 BC. And he has this raindrop on a thread of his hair. And then this raindrop appears again throughout the story, which connects to one of the themes of the novel, which is about how there are rivers in the sky and history is all interconnected. And I do think that theme is quite difficult to get right, the interconnectedness of history, because I think it can come across sometimes as a bit overly sentimental, like how we're all connected and all of that. But Elif Shafak just does it in such a beautiful way that it just really makes you feel like you are part of this bigger picture. I remember thinking while I was reading the story that the reader, any reader who reads this book, could kind of imagine their life as well being one of the point of views in the story, and the story still working. And I think you would really enjoy this book if you like stories with multiple points of view, and how those points of views slowly connect as the story goes on. I really enjoy stories like that because you get to know each of the individual characters, and then it kind of becomes you want them to meet near the end because you know them so well, and I love that kind of thing. I think you'd also like this book if you really love beautifully written work, writing that really just soothes your brain and is inventive and interesting, and each line is really carefully crafted. I think you'd also really enjoy this if you love history. There was a lot of research going into this book, which I will touch upon a bit later in the video. And yeah, I just think actually anyone could also enjoy this book. I think it is one of my favourites, not just of the year, but of all time, I would say. So now I want to talk in a bit more detail about the language use in this book, because Elif Shafak is such a brilliant writer. I wrote while thinking about my thoughts on this book that well-crafted sentences soothe my mind like chocolate soothes my sweet tooth. And that is true. I think one of the reasons I love reading is because I love it when words are just utilised in a way that is unexpected and that just makes my brain tick, and this book did that for me. So I wrote down a few of my favourite sentences and a few sentences that kind of give you an idea of the writing style. So one is an uneasy silence that closes in on itself, like a purse pulled tight by drawstrings. And I really enjoy when a writer takes something mundane or everyday and describes it in a new way. So here the writer is describing something as commonplace as silence. They're describing it in a way that I haven't really seen before, like a purse pulled tight by drawstrings. It highlights the tension, and also it links to the historic atmosphere of the book. Another line I liked is clock time, however punctual it may purport to be, is distorted and deceptive. So this is a part of the story where one of the characters is describing how they view time, and I love it when I'm reading a book that explores a theme such as love, death, time, and then there's a part where the writer fully explores that idea, and you have a paragraph or two which can have the ability to kind of reshape your view on that theme. And this part in the book for me kind of made me look at time a little bit differently, which was so apt because the book looks a lot about history and how everything is connected together. And another line I picked out is, all he knows is if there is a river running through him, it seems always and in every way to lead towards melancholy. And there was another line like this as well, which describes sadness, something like a candle being consumed by its wax. And I think there is a lot in this book about sadness and kind of being overcome by the nature of life and it ending in death. And I think the way that it's described is really well done. And one more thing about language that I wanted to point out is a part near the beginning of the book. So we meet Arthur, and he has just a love of words and a way of interpreting words. And there's a part where he describes different words and how he feels they feel. So I'll read it. It says, words always come to him with their distinctive flavours. Ancient is gamey, like burning fat and stale sausages, bags of mystery, whose ingredients no one really knows. School has a pungency that lingers on the tongue, like licking old boots. And mother is buttery, warm and sweet, though with an acidic undertone, reminiscent of an apple pie gone sour. And I love the idea of words and their cadences influencing the way that you view them. Also, one more thing on the language and also the plot is that throughout the story we get a lot of descriptions of London, because Arthur lives in London and also Salika lives in London. So there was a part on page 235 I wrote where I think it was Arthur, he's going through Great Russell Street, and then at the beginning of the next chapter Zalika is going through Great Russell Street. And I love that kind of thing in dual point of views or multiple point of views, where you see the same location twice and you see that both characters were once in the same location, linking to the theme of the interconnectedness of history. Also, what's cool about that is I currently live in London, and I was reading this book on my way to and from work, and I go through different areas of London, and it's just cool to be reading about a location that you are in. Now I want to touch a bit upon the research that went into this book, because there was so much that I learned through this book, and it's really great when a book is not only enjoyable but also informative. So this book, just to name a few things that it looks at ancient Mesopotamia, it looks at Charles Dickens, who pops up in this book, which I thought was so cool. I love it when a historical character pops up in historical fiction, unexpectedly. Fun. It looks at the British Museum. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a big recurring part of the book. It looks at the science of water, King Ashurbanipal, and it looks at the ancient city of Nineveh. And these areas of history I didn't know too much about. I'd heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but I didn't know how old it was. It's from a long time ago, from BC, and it's one of the first literature texts ever written. And it was really interesting to learn about the discovery of the text, and how it's managed to stay known throughout history. For a text to stay known from BC is quite incredible. And also, I believe that the author is anonymous. It's not known who wrote it, which is also very intriguing. And there's also a quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh in the book, which is, there was a man who saw the deep, and the deep refers to like the secrets of the world. And I kind of had a thought when I was reading that this book is almost like a fragment of the deep, because it is looking at kind of the secrets of the world and how the world works. Okay, and now I want to talk a bit about the themes in this book. So this book really looks at many of the common themes in literature: love, death, time, longing, water. But to be more specific about what it looks at, one of the themes is the interconnectedness of history, which is something that I've talked about before. It looks about how something that happened, hundreds of years ago still can have a relevance today and still can influence what goes on in the world today. And that just, I really like that feeling of feeling like connected to the world, connected to history. You're not, no man is an island. You're not alone. This book also looks at the power of water, not only the healing powers of water, but also the destructive nature of water, and how humans should really value water because it is how we stay alive. The novel also looks at the value of storytelling through the recurring motif of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and how it's a story that was written thousands of years ago and is still relevant today. And then one of my favourite themes in literature is when a book explores the human condition and what it is to be human. This novel does that too. Through each of the three protagonists, we see that theme explored. So Arthur, really, he comes from the slums, he comes from a poor family, and he rises up into the ranks of, I suppose, the intellectual elite, and you really feel his underdog status, and you feel connected to him because you want him to succeed in this world that he wasn't born into. You also have Naren, who I don't want to give anything away, but she really goes through a lot of struggle and pain, and at that point you really know her character well, and so it really elicits an impactful emotional response. And you have Zelika, who is struggling with bouts of depression, struggling to find out who she wants to be in this world. That's easy to connect to as well. So not only does the story help you feel connected to history, but it also helps you feel connected to people as well. So that's There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak, a really brilliant book that I definitely recommend. I just want to end this video with one more thing. There is a part where Arthur travels to Constantinople in the 1800s, and that is modern day Istanbul. And when he arrives, the city is covered in fog, and then he describes the city he doesn't. Elif Shafak describes the city in such a beautiful way, and I found it quite serendipitous, I suppose you could say, because when I first went to Istanbul, the weather was really bad. It was pretty foggy, and the way she described it felt very similar to me when I first arrived in Istanbul, and that was another way of feeling connected to the story, connected through history. I'm sure every time someone visits Istanbul for the first time, they would feel similarly to how Arthur did. And it's just nice to not feel like you're a sole, alone person, but you're connected to the people of history. And yeah, that's all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.